we look at the Kanabo or Tetsubo.
This is the Kitsune clan, a group of sword enthusiasts who like cosplay, reenactment, and historical martial arts. If you have similar interests, feel welcomed.
Imagine you're living in times where people run around with swords, but you don't have the money to buy a sword. You need something that is cheaper but can withstand against a sword. Now, of course, people can come up with things like spears, which should be cheaper, but that's nothing you carry around on an everyday use. The EDC spear is a problematic thing. Maybe it's possible there is something like that in Japanese history. We will look at that in a bit more detail, but it's usually designed for specific situations. Another very simple method would be a stick. But a stick gets easily damaged by a blade, and also, if you try to get in bind or anything, the stick is probably not a good solution, as long as you do not equip your stick with additional structures, for example, tiny little metal nails. Suddenly, your stick can withstand a sword much better. In bind, the blade does no longer slide that much, especially if you use two of these. You can have now a cross block without sliding down.
Video on sliding in cross block is linked in the description box.
And you have a weapon that the swordsman really does not like, because this can damage the sword really easily. This type of weapon is called the Kanabo or the Tetsubo. And if you look in Japanese tradition, these weapons are often depicted being worn by oni, so by demons. If you are a samurai and you have a precious blade, what's your worst nightmare? A demon with a weapon that can shatter your precious blade. Therefore, it's astonishing that the Kanabo does not get a lot of attention by martial arts, also not by pop culture, and also not necessarily by YouTube. There are some examples, and these are usually the very massive ones, but Kanabo and Tetsubo can in principle be any length. It's just a massive stick equipped with metal, meaning with these tiny thorns made out of metal. Overall, this is a cheap construction that is very effective. Using the two small ones that we have here, we got them from a carnival store. They're not very durable, to be honest, but they feel already much better than, for example, using two eskrima sticks against a sword, because really the sliding is different here. You can really stop a sword from sliding down, especially when crossing the weapon. So when you're using both of them, you can have quite some control, and simply smashing against the cosplay weapon already feels like you could do quite some damage to this blade. Of course, concerning techniques, this is not different from most of the sticks that we use. If we look into Filipino martial arts, using two sticks of this length is a very common thing. And so we can apply basically all the strike patterns that we know from that. For example, classical Sinawali, which look like flows in other martial arts, can be nicely transferred to the tiny kanabos we have here. We have also a slightly larger one that is much more massive and was also designed in this cosplay realm idea, and it works pretty much the same. If you are in bind, you have much more control over the blade. If you hit the blade while defending, you often strongly bend that blade out of shape, and in some of the cosplay weapons this stays, so you have to actively bend against it again. This can even happen if the sword strikes and you just deflect, so it's not necessary to really hit hard against the blade. This thing is definitely good against sword, and it's not good for the sword. If we look into history, there have been weapons specifically designed to damage swords, and so they collectively somehow got the term sword breaker. In Europe, this means a very specific type of dagger. In China, this often means a weapon that has a distinct handle, and further distally, a steel rod that can simply be used to block a sword, but also to destroy or at least damage the blade of the sword. The Kanabo overall feels not so different from this idea. And in principle, you could use the Kanabo the smaller types of the Kanabo at least, as a left-hand weapon, while you wield a sword in the lead hand. Therefore, we should expect to see the Kanabo, in fact, quite often. It's a handy addition, and as we pointed out, it's cheap, it's simple to replace, and it's frightening, or we can expect that it's frightening, for the opponent, who must be afraid that his sword will get damaged during the fight. So we would expect a common use. We have the feeling it's not, but that might just be a matter of a bias of sources. Maybe, as the Kanabo was often depicted together with demons, it was also not considered polite to carry around such an object. Or it's a preservation aspect because of the wooden core. Everything that would often be left are the nail type notches on the weapon, and so we might have not many surviving specimens from earlier times. We had already experimented also with a Kanabo simulator with polypropylene weapons. There was a two-handed version. This was also fun, but this seems less useful in most instances. As a left-hand weapon, a smaller Kanabo could be a really simple addition to common fighting styles, and they would probably make them very, very effective. This could be a point to further explore in historical aspects, whether the Kanabo could have played a similar role as the sword breaker in China, for example, or also whether this was a weapon that was interesting for peasants to defend against samurai. On the other hand, that could have also led to this type of weapon being prohibited. But you see, I'm already starting to speculate around here. What was the central point? The central point is the Kanabo is a rather cool weapon that is really not getting the love that it should get. But there's a reason for it, because somehow it is a bit unpleasant to train with it. Already the cosplay version and also the carnival versions with these tiny bumps that are still out of softer material, they hurt when they hit you. And so most people might probably go for simply using a stick. But the Kanabo definitely has a different balance than a normal stick, and in bind it makes a difference, and therefore it's a good advice to have at least some around for training this aspect a bit. You have a stick there with which you have more control over a sword. If we are thinking in techniques as they are used, for example, in Jiu-Jitsu, they could be easily transferred to a Kanabo of a certain length. Maybe this gives some of you ideas how to further explore your stick fighting, and therefore we hope we could inspire you and hope to see you around next time.